I was standing in the middle of my perfectly manicured, read soul-crushingly boring, driveway, squinting up at timber. That was the name I'd given the majestic, dead 30-foot-tall oak tree dominating my front lawn. He hadn't dropped a single leaf of chlorophyll green goodness in 6 months, but I kept him around out of spite. He was my silent, woody middle finger to the entire Windmere Estates Homeowners Association. The committee reviewed the samples, Richard, again. That voice. It was like beige velvet sandpaper. It belonged to Beryl Thistlethwaite, the HOA president and a woman whose personal aesthetic was aggressive neutrality. She stood on the edge of my lawn, a clipboard clutched like the Holy Grail, framed perfectly by her prize-winning, symmetrical boxwoods. "Oh, Beryl, back again? Did you miss me? I was just about to give Timber a vigorous high five to check his structural integrity. Want to join?" I offered a hand, elbow deep in sarcasm. She adjusted her prescription sunglasses, the kind that looked perpetually judging. "Don't be deliberately obtuse. The tree is clearly deceased. It is an aesthetic blight, and more importantly, a liability. You've had 3 warnings. The fine schedule is quite clear." "Deceased? He's just taking a nap, Beryl. A really long autumnal nap. Maybe he's just meditating on the tyranny of organized suburban living. Did the committee test his chakra levels?" I kept my voice level, the tone drier than Timber's oldest branch. She didn't even crack a smile. That was Beryl's superpower, the complete and utter absence of humor. "This isn't a joke. The arborist's report, which you were provided, states 100% loss of vitality, severe heartwood decay evident. It's an eyesore, and it violates Article 3, Section D, Paragraph 7 of our covenants. It must be completely removed." She shoved a certified letter toward me. The ultimatum. I unfolded the heavy paper. My name, Richard E. Kessler, looked criminally formal printed next to the words, "Final Notice." The letter detailed the $500 a day fine that would begin in 72 hours if the dead, unsalvageable eyesore was not completely removed, root and branch. I tucked the letter into my back pocket, feeling a familiar, hot knot of rage. Timber wasn't just a tree anymore. He was a monument to the ridiculousness of my entire life here. He had to stay. But if he had to stay, he needed a dramatic rebrand. Beryl finally marched back across the street, her khaki pants and sensible walking shoes disappearing behind her perfectly symmetrical garden. The silence she left behind was almost worse than her droning voice. I walked up to my porch steps and sat down, pulling out the death certificate for a deciduous plant and letting the absurdity wash over me. This wasn't my first rodeo with Beryl. Oh, no. Our relationship was a beautiful 2-year tapestry woven with threads of petty bureaucracy and righteous indignation. It started innocently enough with my blue recycling bin. Apparently, the standard municipal issue blue bin was too blue for the Windmere aesthetic. It was a nuisance color. I had to buy a special HOA-approved earth tone bin cover that looked exactly like a small beige sarcophagus. Then there was the patio furniture incident. I bought a perfectly nice set, charcoal gray. Beryl sent photos of my outdoor seating to the board, arguing that the shade was too stark and caused visual distress against my approved sandstone glow siding. I fought that one for a month, spending more on legal fees than the furniture cost. But the real war, the true flashpoint, was the petunia scandal. I planted a vibrant mix of petunias and, when Beryl measured them with a ridiculously tiny plastic ruler, 2 of them were allegedly 2 inches taller than the maximum allowable height for bedding flowers. She was obsessed. She didn't want life or color or spontaneous growth. My inner voice was screaming. They wanted blandness. They wanted conformity. They wanted a beige, soulless purgatory. And I was their single, slightly faded red sock in the wash. Every perfectly sculpted shrub, every painfully uniform mailbox, and every pristine square foot of lawn was a testament to Beryl's dictatorship. I looked at her property, a masterpiece of architectural control, and then at timber, my beautiful, defiant corpse of a tree. I loved him for his rebellion. I crumpled the fine letter into a tight ball, feeling the thick, expensive paper crack under my grip. Remove him? No. That's what they expected. I was going to modify him. If they wanted the tree dealt with, I'd deal with it. But I wasn't just going to cut him down. I was going to turn him into a permanent, undeniable, 30-foot-tall expression of my opinion of the Windermere Estates HOA. The idea hit me like a lightning bolt, right on the metaphorical head. But it was magnificent, glorious, and utterly passive-aggressive. The next day, I had my best friend, Gary, on a video call. He was 2 states away, mercifully free of HOA tyranny, and sipping a beer while I paced my living room. So, let me get this straight, Gary said, his face filling the screen. Beryl Thistlethwaite, she of the 2 blue bin crisis, has given you 72 hours to remove your giant dead oak tree, or they start fining you $500 a day. Precisely, I confirmed, running a hand through my already messy hair. And I can't afford to let that fine stack up. The fines for the unauthorized bird feeder incident alone nearly bankrupted me. Look, man, just cut it down. Take the loss. Live to fight another day, Gary advised, though he sounded like he knew I wouldn't. Cut it down? That's what they want. That's the surrender. That tree, Gary, is the last symbol of free will on this block. I'm not cutting it down, Gary. I'm having it carved. Gary choked on his beer. Carved? Into what? A giant squirrel holding an acorn? Because that's still a violation, pal. Probably a wildlife violation, plus a structure of questionable intent violation. No, I said, leaning into the camera, lowering my voice conspiratorially, into a 30-foot-tall hand, giving the live long and prosper sign. The silence on Gary's end was golden. He slowly put his beer down. Wait, you mean the Vulcan salute? Like Spock? 30 feet tall? Exactly. It's majestic. It's defiant. It's a statement about the illogical nature of bureaucratic control. And it's incredibly difficult to argue with legally. I immediately started scouring the Windermere Estates bylaws and covenants, revised 2021, reading the absurd regulations aloud. The volume was thick enough to be a doorstop. Listen to this. Article 3, Section D, Paragraph 7. Dead or diseased trees. All trees deemed deceased or irreparably diseased by a certified arborist must be removed or replaced within 72 hours of notification. Failure to comply will result in fines as outlined in the schedule of penalties. See? Removed or replaced. That's where they think they have me. I tapped the page. And where's the loophole, Rick? Unless you're replacing it with another dead tree, I don't see it, Gary muttered. Ah, but there is zero mention of artistic post-mortem wood manipulation, I declared, practically shouting. They focus exclusively on removal or replacement of the dead tree. But what if the tree is still there, Gary? What if the structure remains the original plant matter, merely shaped? I flipped pages, running my finger down the Structures and Ornamentation section. Article 4, Section B, Unapproved Structures. No sheds, fences, non-decorative poles, or permanent structures exceeding 12 and 12 feet in height shall be erected without written approval from the Architectural Committee. 12 feet. That's their cap. 30 feet is significantly larger than 12, Rick. You're sunk. No, I corrected, shaking my head vigorously. The definition of structure is key. The list, sheds, fences, poles, etc. These are all erected. They are built onto the property. My tree, timber, was grandfathered in. It was already a 30-foot structure, right? I'm not erecting anything. I am reducing it. I'm taking material away, not adding it. The rules state I must remove the dead tree. I am modifying the dead tree. It's an act of post-arbor preservation, not construction. Gary paused, then took a slow sip of his beer. Rick, that's insane. It's a completely unhinged interpretation of the covenants. Unwritten rules are their whole game, Gary. My job is to fight their unwritten rules with my equally unwritten, yet technically sound loopholes. I'm taking the dead tree, which they mandate be addressed, and turning it into a piece of art that remains rooted to the earth, thus remaining original plant matter and simultaneously telling Beryl and her entire miserable little kingdom to live long and prosper. It's perfect. It's petty. It's war. The next day was a dizzying spiral of phone calls. I needed an artist, a true wood alchemist, someone who saw a dead oak not as firewood, but as a canvas for high-level corporate bureaucratic shade. My initial calls were predictable disasters. Contractor A, grizzled lumberjack. 30 feet? Saluting? Buddy, I cut trees down. I don't give them a personality disorder. I can give you a nice, low stump, maybe paint it red. That'll confuse him. He hung up before I could explain the subtle majesty of Vulcan philosophy. Contractor B, posh sculptor. My work is about capturing the soul of the wood, sir, not mocking a tedious suburban bureaucracy with vulgar sci-fi gestures, perhaps a serene angel, or a gentle deer. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. A serene deer would be the ultimate surrender. Then, through a sketchy online forum dedicated to outlaw art installations, I found him. Sawdust Sam. His profile picture was an unblinking, slightly menacing selfie next to a gargantuan carved Bigfoot holding a fishing pole. His tagline, "I carve wood that makes people angry." I called the number. A low, gravelly voice answered. Yeah, Sam. Hi, Sam. My name's Rick. I have a job for you. It's 30 feet tall, it's an oak, and I need it carved into a giant hand. Specifically, a Vulcan salute. You know, live long and prosper. There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of wind chimes and what sounded suspiciously like a power sander. HOA? Sam asked, his voice suddenly thick with understanding, like a grizzled detective who just smelled the perp. HOA, I confirmed. The president, Beryl Thistlethwaite, she's obsessed with beige and compliance. She gave me 72 hours to remove the dead tree. You want me to carve an eternal wooden middle finger dressed up as a peace sign and stick it to the man? Essentially, yes, but legally sound. Sam let out a low, guttural chuckle. Buddy, I love you. I once spent 6 months fighting an HOA because they said my mailbox was too rustic. I ended up carving a 40-foot totem pole on my property line until they literally bought me out. You've got yourself a wood alchemist. The negotiation was entirely dialogue and mutual disdain for the man. Sam wasn't interested in money so much as supplies. We met at a suspiciously empty diner 20 miles outside the jurisdiction of Windmere Estates. Sam arrived on a motorcycle that sounded like a blender full of rocks, wearing a vest made entirely of denim patches. All right, here's the deal, Rick, Sam said, pushing a greasy napkin contract across the table. It was scribbled in Sharpie. The fee is negotiable, but the contract is non-negotiable. I need 3 things. Hit me. Cash? A blood oath? First, I need 48 cans of nuclear pomegranate blast energy drink, the obscure Japanese one. Only that one. I drink one every hour I'm working. If I run out, I stop carving. Instant termination of contract. I blinked. 48 cans of nuclear pomegranate blast. Got it. What else? Second, I need unrestricted access to industrial-grade scaffolding, rated for 300 pounds per square foot. This ain't a little statue, Rick. This is a monument to pettiness. I need the good stuff. Done. And third, he paused, leaning in, his eyes narrowed. You don't talk. To anyone. Except me, Blade, and Stump. We communicate in whispers and chainsaw noises. Got it? The deal was finalized with a handshake sticky from pancake syrup. The energy drink requirement alone was more insane than the HOA rules. The very next afternoon, Beryl, having noticed my strange contractor meetings, sent the initial, snarky email inquiry that I knew was coming. Subject: Immediate inquiry regarding unpermitted activities on lot. Richard, the board requires a detailed permit application for any major structural modifications to the property's flora. We have observed large deliveries, including what appears to be scaffolding equipment. Please provide the purpose of this installation, the estimated completion date, and the final structural dimensions, as per Article 4, Section B, Subsection 2, regarding height restrictions. We assume this is the removal you were intending. Kindly clarify. Beryl Thistlethwaite, HOA President. I practically cackled reading it. Flora? It's a corpse on my lawn, Beryl. I'm modifying its post-mortem attitude. My written response was a masterpiece of legally useless ambiguity. Subject: Immediate inquiry regarding unpermitted activities on lot. 47. Beryl, I am in compliance with the final notice regarding the dead oak, which you may call Flora. I am performing necessary post-arbor preservation services to stabilize the existing structural components of the tree. The scaffolding is for safety purposes, and the dimensions will naturally be reduced upon completion of the preservation process. No structure is being erected. See you at the next meeting. Rick Kessler, Lot 147. She hated that. She hated the ambiguity. She hated the fact that I was using the word preservation for a dead thing. The delivery of the specialized, towering scaffolding and the industrial-grade tarps Sam demanded came the next morning. It generated immediate, suspicious stares from the neighbors. Old Mr. Peabody nearly drove his golf cart into my mailbox while gawking. The game was officially afoot. The next day, as Sam's crew, Blade and Stump, began erecting the steel monstrosity that would allow them to reach the 30-foot peak of timber, Beryl sent her junior operative. His name was Kenneth, and he was Beryl's lapdog. A man whose ambition in life was to move from treasurer to vice, president of the HOA. I found Kenneth hovering near my hedges, attempting to photograph the site of impending violation with a tiny, inadequate smartphone camera. He looked like an undercover agent whose cover was blown by his excessive use of sunscreen. "Kenneth, good morning. What a lovely day for trespassing," I said cheerfully, approaching him with a mug of coffee. He jumped, nearly dropping his phone. "Richard, I'm not trespassing. I am required to document the nature of the work. The board needs a clear visual assessment of the modifications." "Modifications? Ken, you wound me. There are no modifications. What precisely is being performed?" I gestured dramatically toward the scaffolding. "Well, you have a giant metal thing around the dead tree." That thing is a safety requirement for the wood de-deading procedure. It's a complicated procedure, Ken. Highly technical. Lots of specialized, noisy equipment. We're working on the integrity of the heartwood structure. I lowered my voice. It's about stability and future prevention of decay. Do you know what heartwood decay is, Kenneth? Kenneth shifted nervously. No, but I am required to take photos of the area being worked on. I'm sorry, but that's a hard hat zone, per OSHA regulations. I lied smoothly. Best you stand back for safety. You don't want to get sawdust in your nice, Beryl-approved polo shirt, do you? You'd be fined for unsightly material on clothing. He visibly flinched at the thought of a fine. But the board is demanding to know what is under those tarps. The tarps are for atmospheric stabilization during the intensive preservation process, I explained, channeling the most baffling jargon I could invent. We're trying to prevent moisture ingress. It's delicate work. The moment the process is complete, the tarps come down. I then poured a small amount of coffee grounds near his shoe. Oh, look, ground pollution. You might want to get that before Beryl sees. She'll measure the granules, Ken. Kenneth retreated, confused, clicking a few useless blurred photos of the bright blue industrial tarp that now covered the central trunk of timber. He was already muttering about ground pollution protocol. Later that evening, Sam pulled me aside while Blade and Stump were assembling their chainsaws. All right, Rick, here's the secret schedule. These HOA types, they look at the rule book, right? And the rule book says no excessive noise before 8 a.m. or after 6 p.m. So we follow the rules. To the letter. During the day, we'll only carve the core structure using the loudest chainsaws we have. The noise will mask any telltale shaping sounds. And the hand? The actual hand, the fingers, the famous Vulcan salutation that's done under the massive tarps at night using quieter tools, chisels, small grinders. We'll look like we're just maintaining the structural integrity. They'll hear noise, but they won't hear shaping. The entire project is now an exercise in absurd, deliberate secrecy. Sam grinned. We're going covert on a dead tree. This is awesome. The next 3 days were a cacophony of carefully regulated noise and paranoid whispers. The sound of massive chainsaws ripping through wood during the day was like music to my ears, mainly because it meant Beryl was probably having a vascular event. My primary interaction was with Sam's equally eccentric assistants, Blade and Stump. Blade was skinny and twitchy, wearing a welding mask pushed up on his forehead. Stump was built like a refrigerator and communicated mostly through grunts and the precise measurement of chains. I walked up to the scaffolding where Sam was sketching a line on the tarp, looking like a demonic Leonardo da Vinci. Morning, Sam. Any issues with the nuclear pomegranate supply? 46 cans remaining. Don't panic, he grunted. Blade, we need the deep dish flipper bit on the dorsal phalanges. We're going for authenticity. Blade, up a dizzying 20 feet, shouted down over the persistent hum of the generator. The dorsal phalanges need that authentic, I told you so curvature, Sam. We can't have a lazy Vulcan. I winced. Dorsal phalanges? You guys have jargon for everything, don't you? It's art, Rick. You gotta respect the terminology, Sam said, pulling down his respirator. We're shaping the back of the hand. The palm needs to be flat, the index and middle fingers need to be crisp and separate, and the ring and pinky need to be joined by a clean vertical cut. Precision is key. We're not carving a mitten here. I'm paying $10,000 for a pair of guys named Blade and Stump to talk about dorsal phalanges on a tree. This is peak suburbia, I muttered internally. Stump, hauling a heavy chain up the scaffolding, paused and looked down at me with surprising intensity. You know, Rick, A dead tree is the perfect canvas. It's silent. It's already surrendered to nature. We're just giving it a final, beautiful thought, a final act of defiance. A beautiful 30-foot thought of defiance. I like that, Stump. Just make sure your beige queen neighbor doesn't lose a gnome, Blade shouted, pointing a massive power drill toward Beryl's perfectly symmetrical gnome garden across the street. The sheer size of the 30-foot project led to a minor scaffolding mishap. A section of the pole swung out accidentally, missing Beryl's prize-winning gnome, Gnomus Rex 5, by maybe 6 inches. The sound of the metal clanking against the perfectly manicured sod was loud enough to bring Beryl running out of her house, waving her arms like an air traffic controller directing a disaster. "Richard, what in the name of God are you doing? That could have caused significant property damage." "Just routine maintenance, Beryl. We're setting the stabilization arm. Safety first. Nothing to see here. Unless you want to be cited for loitering in a work zone," I yelled back, feeling the sweet, sweet thrill of turning her own bureaucratic weapon against her. She retreated, her jaw visibly twitching, but the incident proved one thing. The tarps were working. She still had no idea what was beneath. The constant drone of the chainsaw and the mystery of the gigantic covered object on my lawn started to break the code of silence in Windmere Estates. The neighbors, usually terrified to speak above a whisper for fear of an HOA violation, began to rally. One afternoon, a shaky shadow appeared at the edge of my driveway. It was Mrs. Henderson, the kindest, most perpetually terrified woman on the street. She was carrying a pitcher of lemonade, which she thrust at me as if it were contraband. "Richard, I made you some lemonade. It's fresh. Don't let Beryl see. She cited me last month for unauthorized outdoor hydration stations." "Mrs. Henderson, you're a hero. Come closer. This is a very safe zone. What's the word on the street?" She leaned in, whispering, despite the loud chainsaw noise. "It's glorious. They all hate Beryl, Richard. We all do. We just don't have the courage you have. We all know that tree is going to be something wonderful. I think what you're doing is very bold, Richard. Just please, don't tell anyone I said that. My bird bath is already on thin ice." Her support was crucial exposition. It wasn't just my fight. It was the whole community's repressed rage channeled through my dead oak. Just as I was enjoying the moment of shared rebellion, Sam, who had briefly come down, yelled, "Rick, we've got a camouflage crisis." "What's the crisis, Sam? Did we run out of nuclear pomegranate?" "Worse. The tarp. It's taupe 7. Look." He held up a certified letter that must have been slipped under my door by Kenneth. Subject: Immediate violation. Unapproved color of protective covering. The industrial tarp utilized for covering the purported post-arbor preservation services is designated as taupe 7, aesthetic distress classification, which violates the External Fixtures Color Palette Guide, Appendix B. A replacement tarp in an approved neutral tone, e.g. desert fawn or pebble gray, must be installed within 2 hours or fines will begin. I stared at the sheer, unadulterated madness of it. They couldn't cite the work, so they cited the color of the tarp covering the work. "This is gold, Rick! Pure, unadulterated gold!" Sam roared with laughter. "Okay, Beryl wants a distraction. I'll give her a distraction," I said, marching back inside. I drove straight to the largest arts and crafts store in the next county and bought the single most offensive, ridiculous tapestry tarp I could find. A massive, neon-colored tie-dye sheet featuring a poorly drawn unicorn and a rainbow. It was guaranteed to cause permanent, aesthetic distress. The phone call from Beryl was immediate. Beryl. Richard, what is that abomination now covering your property? It's completely unsuited to the aesthetic integrity of Windmere. Rick. It's Desert Fawn's eccentric artistic cousin, Beryl, and it's not an external fixture. It's temporary preservation apparatus. You gave me 2 hours to replace the taupe 7, and I did. Is the pattern color specifically disallowed in the covenants? Beryl, sputtering. Well, no, but the spirit of the law is clear. Rick. The spirit of my law is, live long and prosper, Beryl, and I followed your rules. Enjoy the neon unicorn. I hung up. Victory tasted like nuclear pomegranate. The HOA couldn't cite the color, couldn't cite the structure, and couldn't cite the noise, because it was perfectly timed. So Beryl upped the ante. She bypassed the HOA and called the county. The next morning, I was chatting with Stump about the optimal angle for the Vulcan thumb. It needed to look resolute, not hesitant, when a white sedan pulled up. It wasn't Beryl's sensible Toyota. This was an official, slightly beat-up Ford Crown Vic with the official seal of the County Code Enforcement. Out stepped a man named Dale. Dale was about 55, wearing a faded polo shirt, and he looked like he hadn't had a proper vacation in 20 years. He carried a clipboard like a shield against the world's madness. Rick Kessler? Dale asked, rubbing his temples. The one and only. Welcome to the site of Post Arbor Preservation. Can I offer you a nuclear pomegranate blast? They're strangely energizing. No, thank you, sir. I'm Code Enforcement Officer Dale Peterson. I've received numerous complaints about an unauthorized structure. A 30-foot structure, allegedly covered in a truly hideous tapestry. That would be the temporary preservation apparatus covering the permanent existing tree, timber. It's dead, Dale. The HOA demands I deal with the dead tree. I am dealing with it. The complainant, a Ms. Thistlethwaite, claims this is a sculpture that exceeds the 12-foot limit on unapproved external structures. I sighed, pulling out my well-worn copy of the covenants. Let's look at the definition of a structure, Dale. Article 4, Section B. No sheds, fences, non-decorative poles, or permanent structures exceeding 12 feet in height shall be erected. See the verb, Dale? Erected. I did not erect this tree. God did. Or, nature. It's a grandfathered, living, now dead, piece of flora that I am merely shaping. Dale massaged his eyes, then looked up at the enormous neon tarp, which was swaying slightly in the breeze. So, it's not a sculpture? It's treatment? Exactly. Think of it as a very aggressive, extremely tall, deep tissue massage for a formerly dead tree. We're just trying to bring out its inner beauty. It's an act of subtractive artistic preservation. I'm taking material away, Dale, not adding it. You'd have a case if I slapped a 12-foot shed on top of it, but I'm just shaping the wood that's already there. Dale flipped through his county regulations, his face growing paler. There is nothing in the county zoning code that regulates the post-mortem shaping of existing, rooted flora on private residential property, provided it doesn't violate structural safety codes. And Sam is a certified, insured artist. The scaffolding is rated for the job. It's safe, Dale. It's just artistically expressive. Dale stared at the tree, then at Beryl's house, then back at me. He looked defeated. Sir, I can't issue a citation for this. It's eccentric, but it's not a violation of county code. However, he pointed a weary finger at me. She is calling the commissioner every hour. She's going to come at you with the nuisance clause. They always do. I'm ready for the nuisance clause, Dale. Thanks for the heads up. Have a great day. Dale trudged back to his car, looking like he needed a month in the tropics and a career change. The standoff was over, and I won the first official NOS HOA round. The next 3 nights were a blur of sawdust and secrecy. The tarps were zipped up tight, and the only sounds were the low, rhythmic rasp of chains and the concentrated hiss of specialized sanding equipment. We were working entirely by the light of powerful LED spotlights, and the air was thick with the scent of fresh-cut oak and nuclear pomegranate. I was up there with Sam, holding the spotlight steady as he meticulously separated the wood to form the final iconic V shape between the middle and ring fingers. The entire project depended on the precision of that single 4-inch gap. "You know, Rick," Sam murmured, carefully guiding a miniature chainsaw, "HOAs, they're not about rules. They're about fear. They sell the illusion of control, and fear is always fragile. I think Beryl's fear is more about my choice of patio cushion color, Sam. Nah, the cushion is just the symptom. The disease is the belief that everyone should live the same, quiet, predictable life. You're showing them that defiance can be beautiful and legal at the same time. You're carving a giant wooden question mark into the American dream." We continued in silence for a while, the only sounds the tools and the quiet chewing of sawdust by Stump, who I suspect was part beaver. Around 1:00 a.m., the work was interrupted. I heard a faint crunching sound from the perimeter of the property. "Hold the light, Sam. We have a peeping Tom." I climbed down the inner ladder of the scaffolding. There, huddled behind my approved rhododendron bush, was Beryl's husband, Harold. Poor, pathetic Harold. He was holding a pair of powerful binoculars and trying desperately to peek under the tie-dye tarp. I walked right up to him. He froze like a deer caught in the headlights of a very strange neon-covered construction site. The confrontation was silent and utterly absurd. I just stood there, arms crossed, staring down at Harold. He fumbled with the binoculars, dropping them into the bush. He didn't say a word. I didn't say a word. We just glared at each other, one silent, terrified man caught spying, and one smug, vengeful man guarding his giant wooden secret. Finally, Harold made a noise like a frightened pigeon, backed away through the hedge, and scampered back to Beryl's beige fortress. With that final bit of tension out of the way, we finished. Sam stepped back, wiping his brow with a bandana. He looked up at the 30-foot covered hand, ready to salute the universe. "It's ready, Rick," he said, his voice laced with pure, satisfied smirk. "It's structurally sound, weatherproofed, and perfectly defiant. They're going to need therapy, buddy. Good luck." He and his crew packed up, leaving the scaffolding, and vanished into the pre-dawn quiet, as quietly as they had arrived, leaving behind nothing but the giant, ridiculous tarp. The air was still cool and damp with dew. The neighborhood was quiet, still wrapped in the manufactured conformity of 6:00 a.m. suburbia. The moment of the reveal had arrived. I climbed the scaffolding one last time. The tie-dye tarp was secured by 4 heavy-duty industrial ropes. I was alone, wearing my pajamas and a ridiculous amount of nervous energy. I double-checked the pulleys. This had to be dramatic. This had to be earned. I took a deep breath, whispered, "For timber," and yanked the release cord. The massive neon-colored tapestry fell with a whisper, crumpling onto my lawn in a heap of fabric. And there it was, 30 feet of perfectly carved, beautiful, petrified oak, The grain of the dead wood gave the hand a rugged, ancient quality, and the size was simply overwhelming. The index and middle fingers were held together with absolute precision. The ring and pinky were joined in a clean, vertical cut. The thumb was held back, resolute and strong. It was majestic, defiant, and the most perfectly executed Vulcan salutation I could have ever imagined. It towered over my house, over the street, over Beryl's miserable existence. The first sound wasn't a car horn or a shout. It was a faint psst from across the street. Mrs. Henderson's window curtain twitched, and my phone buzzed with a single, capitalized text message. Yes. Then, the chaos. I heard the distinct sound of a short circuit. Beryl's automatic sprinklers across the street suddenly shorted out, shooting a thick, hissing jet of water straight up into the air, soaking her prized rhododendrons. I stood there, watching the sheer, perfect drama unfold, feeling a smug smile spread across my face. It was beautiful. Beryl arrived on the scene 10 minutes later, looking like a hurricane in a twin set. She was flanked by 2 other board members, Meredith, the secretary, who always looked terrified, and Mr. Jenkins, the treasurer, who was just obsessed with budgets. They rushed my lawn, stopping dead in their tracks 15 feet from the statue. Their faces were a masterpiece of sputtering, citing non-existent statutes. Richard, you lunatic! What is this monstrosity? It's an unapproved structure. It violates the architectural control guidelines. Beryl's voice was actually trembling, a beautiful sound I would cherish forever. Hold on, Beryl. Let's keep it civil, I said, stepping off the scaffolding ladder. It's timber. He's fine. I told you I was performing post-arbor preservation. He looks preserved, wouldn't you say? Strong. Resolute. It's a hand. A giant, ridiculous sci-fi hand, Meredith squeaked, holding her hands over her mouth. Mr. Jenkins, the budget man, spoke up, his voice cracking with fear. It's 30 feet. That's 18 feet over the height limit for an unapproved structure. Article 4.B. This is a gross violation. Jenkins, back to the structures section, are we? I leaned in. Section 4.B, structures. That applies to sheds, fences, and satellite dishes, structures that are erected. I did not erect this, Jenkins. This is foliage. Dead foliage, granted, but still tree. No structural modification was made, only subtractive artistic wood shaping. You demanded I deal with the dead tree. I dealt with it. Live long and prosper. Beryl yanked out her phone and started yelling. I'm calling Browning and Associates right now. Put me through to Mr. Browning. Tell him it's an emergency HOA violation. The resulting dialogue, conducted entirely through Beryl's phone speaker on my lawn, was high drama. Beryl, shouting into the phone, Mr. Browning, he's carved the entire dead oak into a hand. It's 30 feet. We need an immediate injunction. We need a cease and desist order for tree carving. Mr. Browning, a faint, tinny voice. Is it still rooted, Beryl? Is it the original tree? Beryl. Yes, but it's shaped. It's a hand. Mr. Browning. Does the covenant explicitly ban post-mortem arboreal carving, or only erecting new structures? Beryl. We never anticipated a need to ban that. Mr. Browning. Then, technically, Beryl, if the structure is the original plant matter and he hasn't added material and it's not giving a universally recognized obscene gesture, you are currently in a gray area. You may have to cite nuisance or diminution of property value. Beryl slammed the phone shut. She stared at me, defeated, but her eyes held a new, furious calculation. Fine. If it's not a structure, it's a public nuisance, and it must come down immediately. I'm calling the police. I'm claiming it's a danger, a distraction, and public indecency." Beryl's escalation was quick. About 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. Again, no sirens, just the silent, bored arrival of two men who clearly did not want to be mediating a suburban arboreal art crisis. The officers were Officer Smith, young, twitchy, desperately trying to appear professional, and Officer Rodriguez, older, tired, and completely over it. Beryl immediately rushed over and began directing them like a traffic cop who had found a 10-car pileup involving a UFO. "Officers, thank goodness! That man is in violation of county decency and safety codes. Look at the size of that thing. It's an aggressive, inappropriate display." Officer Rodriguez, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, walked over to me. Officer Smith took notes with a ridiculously small pen. "Sir, the complainant is claiming public disturbance and inappropriate display." "What exactly am I looking at here?" Rodriguez's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Officer, you are looking at an act of arboreal preservation and a peaceful appreciation for interstellar peace," I explained, pointing proudly at the massive hand. "It's a universally recognized symbol of hope and longevity. Where is the crime? Does your training cover 30-foot wooden philosophy?" Officer Smith mumbled something into his notepad about eccentric ornamentation. Beryl inserted herself between us. "It's an eyesore! It's a menace! It distracts drivers! It's the closest thing to a 40-foot middle finger this man could legally get away with! He's mocking us!" "Ma'am, I understand your frustration with your neighborhood association rules," Officer Rodriguez said, his eyes still locked on the Vulcan salute, which seemed to shimmer majestically in the sunlight. "But mocking is not, to my knowledge, a felony." "Sir, the hand itself is not giving an obscene gesture," Officer Smith interjected, referring to his notebook. "The gesture is, and I quote, highly positive and a sign of peace between cultures." "But it's 30 feet tall! It's a distraction! It's a safety hazard!" Beryl shrieked. "We're happy to run a structural test, ma'am, but it's a rooted tree trunk. If we cited every tall, ugly, distracting object in this county, we'd need a bigger police force," Rodriguez stated calmly. He turned back to me. "Mr. Kessler, is the tree structurally sound?" "Absolutely, officer. The dead wood is dense oak. It's been carved, but the core stability is excellent. My contractor, Sawdust Sam, ensured that. It's safer than when it had decaying branches that could fall on a pedestrian." Rodriguez sighed, looking at Beryl, then at the hand. He had clearly made his decision. "Ma'am, unless this 30-foot hand is giving us the finger, it's not illegal. It's eccentric, maybe, but not criminal. It's a civil matter. Your dispute is with your homeowners association, not with the law. We can't issue a citation for a poorly chosen lawn ornament. We recommend you pursue your civil remedies." They packed up their tiny pen and left, leaving Beryl sputtering in impotent fury. I felt the surge of adrenaline from the small victory. Round 4 to Rick. The cops were out, but Beryl was not done. The police encounter was the fuel the story needed. Within hours, the image of the colossal Vulcan salute, standing defiant against the backdrop of Beryl's perfectly beige house, went viral on local social media. Someone had dubbed it the Arbor of Logic. People started driving slowly past my house all day, taking pictures and giving me thumbs up from their cars. The local news station sent a clearly amused reporter, Sarah Chin, and a cameraman by lunchtime. Sarah, a young woman with a microphone the size of a small brick, approached me where I was calmly watering my newly replanted petunias, which were, I noted, all precisely the HOA-approved height. "Mr. Kessler, Sarah Chin, Channel 8 News. This has become quite the sensation. Some neighbors call it an eyesore, others call it a monument to defiance. What do you call it? I call it full compliance, I said, deadpan, looking right into the camera. My HOA demanded I deal with a dead tree. I dealt with it. I employed a professional arboreal sculptor to stabilize the core trunk and give the wood a permanent, hopeful message. It is not an unapproved structure. It is an act of post-mortem arboreal preservation. I followed the rules, to the letter. But the gesture? The Vulcan salute? It's a message of peace and logic, Sarah. Two things I think we could all use more of in this neighborhood. Besides, what could be less offensive than a peaceful salute? Later that day, the final, desperate legal maneuver arrived via certified mail. A thick, expensive envelope from Browning and Associates. They were, as Dale predicted, threatening an expensive, drawn-out lawsuit based on the general nuisance clause, claiming the statue caused significant emotional distress and diminution of property value to the entire community. It was a classic SLAP, strategic lawsuit against public participation, threat designed to bury me in legal fees. But I was ready. The supportive neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, had secretly set up a GoFundMe page called Save the Vulcan Hand. I called up my friend Gary, the lawyer, who found the exact clause I needed. I fired back with a professionally drafted response. To Browning and Associates, proposed litigation against Richard E. Kessler. Your threat of civil action citing general nuisance is noted. Please be advised that Mr. Kessler's project is a work of community-supported public art, as evidenced by the media coverage and the fact that a community-led GoFundMe page, Save the Vulcan Hand, has already raised $5,000 to cover the preservation services and any potential litigation costs. Any attempt to pursue this frivolous, non-meritorious action will be met with an immediate counterclaim for malicious prosecution and a SLAP violation. Furthermore, the negative publicity this matter has already generated for the Windermere Estates HOA has already resulted in a greater diminution of property value than any tree carving ever could. Live long and prosper. I didn't hear back from Browning and Associates. The victory was not loud, but it was absolute. Beryl, humiliated by the negative media attention, facing the very real threat of costly litigation she couldn't fund with her meager HOA treasury, quietly dropped the issue. She couldn't fight a lawsuit that was being crowdfunded by the very neighbors she ruled over. The HOA sent one final, vague letter, slipped under my door, not signed by Beryl, but by a nameless HOA management representative. It acknowledged the temporary nature of the structure, despite it being permanently carved wood, and stated that they would monitor its effect on community morale and compliance going forward. It was the closest thing to an unconditional surrender I would ever receive from the Windermere Estates HOA. I stood in my driveway one evening, the setting sun casting a long, beautiful shadow of the massive Vulcan salute down the street, right onto Beryl's prize-winning boxwoods. It wasn't about the tree, or even the sign. It was about proving that you can't regulate the human spirit, even if that spirit manifests as a 30-foot-tall, legally protected symbol of intergalactic peace. The fine schedule was defunct. The beige tyranny had suffered a massive, beautiful wooden defeat. Beryl lost. The tree won. And I got my neighborhood's new, glorious landmark. I was, perhaps, the most beloved man in Windermere Estates, all because I had channeled my petty rage into high-concept art. It just goes to show you, sometimes the most aggressive thing you can do is simply follow the rules, but do it with the soul of a mischievous artist. I was sipping my tea when I heard footsteps approaching. It was Mrs. Henderson. She walked right up to the edge of my lawn, looked up at the towering, magnificent hand, and a genuine, unafraid smile broke across her face. It really is something, Rick. It is. It's Timber's final, beautiful thought. She lowered her voice only slightly, giving a quick glance toward Beryl's darkened house. Then she looked me straight in the eye and quietly whispered the perfect final line, "Live long and prosper, Rick." I gave her a small, knowing nod. "And may your petunias grow tall, Mrs. Henderson."